So, welcome back to part 2 of the TimeCop review. I'm going to go directly into what the Lord was showing me before we left, and then I'll come back to the actual film. So, David was brought into his kingship, but he did not accomplish everything immediately once he was brought into his exaltation and elevation, which brought me back to the end of the review that I did on Adam and Eve in the garden. I think it was the last part. I talked about when Jehu was exalted into his position, right? But I also talked about the fact that before the exaltation, that your husband was going to go into a period of solitude as the Lord was giving him instructions. Now, I may have to go back to that review to get details because I don't even remember what I said in there. It's been months since I did that review, and I believe it's relevant. But what the Lord was also showing me, looking at David and what he was appointed to do. Remember, David was not exalted to his position. He killed Goliath at 17, but he didn't get positioned as king till 47, I believe. So it was 30 years before he got his position. I'm going to repeat that for my own reference sake. It was 30 years. You know what you know. And I'm talking to myself on this one. You know what you know about your particular person, okay? That's all I'm going to say. There's an exaltation. Jehu was positioned after Elijah died, and he was to go directly to Jezebel and take her out. Coming back, Jezebel, and I was just listening to this yesterday, so this is probably relevant, that Jezebel can be a man or a woman. That spirit can operate in either party, which makes sense to this film because of the fact that there was a man that was trying to act as an authority over this cop, right? So, David, when he came into his position, there were certain things that he was supposed to do, which he did. But he had the heart for God. He just got caught up. The thing that I believe happened with the God-ordained spouses in the 30 years before the exaltation is the husband got caught up because the enemy figured out who he was. You have to go back to that review I did on Adam and Eve in the garden where I talk about he was targeted and fell for it. Or did he? I'm going to leave that alone. Because what we know now is if our God-ordained spouses were a double agent, did he fall for it or did he not? Did he do that on purpose? Next, Internal Affairs is investigating him and his boss. His boss says to him that this woman has to ride along with him on his jump. Now, the boss represents the father and represents a prophetic witness and or ally in this man's life. I know who it is for my God-ordained spouse. And that actually makes sense now. Jesus. I'm going to get to it later. Macomb, it's not Macomb. I'm thinking of his friend's name, but Macomb is the enemy to him. But they have to go on this jump. When they're going on this jump, they end up landing in the lake and swimming to the side. I'm being reminded of a dream that Beaufort Christ had of a lake that she could oversee. That as she was going over this lake, there were multiple alligators. This must be relevant to this. Your God-ordained spouse, and this is a known fact, if you, depending on how you that know that your spouse is involved in a high-powered position, there are many alligators, vipers, snakes, these types of things that are around this individual. Been around them. Some of them didn't even know they were there. Because remember, David always tried to fit in. David did not want to stand out. David didn't. Which I believe in that case, by not wanting to stand out, led him into doing what he did against God. Because he became too comfortable in that environment. Okay? But that's not the point right now. Okay? These snakes, these vipers, these alligators, they've been lurking under the water all this time. They've been there. They've been around your God-ordained spouse. But he didn't recognize them until you started praying. This is why you are a danger to their plans. That's why they needed to take who? You out and the house that you built. Go back and watch my word. I keep referring back to it on, it was a 6-part series on building the house. This is the danger. With you not in his life, that takes him off his game. Even before you come in his life, he's still off his game because you ain't with him. It's funny, I was listening to Word yesterday, and they were talking about the fact that the woman not being there, he knows that he can't accomplish what he needs to accomplish without you there. So he has to come to you in order to bring that into fruition, right? So, with that being said, Lord help me. There is a level of clarity that this man does not have. He's strategic. He has strategy. He can maneuver and he can execute. But he's a little bit off put on his game because you ain't around. Okay? He takes this particular woman, and this is the internal affairs agent that had to ride along with him. And she said that they're talking about, oh, I can't believe it. What today's date is? And he said it's October 8th or something like that. She's like, oh my goodness, tomorrow's my birthday. And he's like, really? And she says, I kind of wish that I could contact myself and tell her not to sleep with Bobby, whatever his name was. And he said, a smart woman would call Bobby and say not to sleep with you. So she took that as whatever. And then they went to where they were supposed to go. It was a warehouse. So when they get there, they end up finding out that Macomb had went back in order to tell himself what was needed to be done in order to position himself for the presidency. But he got that information. He was switching the information with himself, and he handed him the envelope. He told him where he needed to get the money from. He told him all the information that he needed. But they catch Macomb, and he was like, So what you think you gonna do though? You up there and I'm down here. How you gonna keep a gun on me to prevent me from? And he's like, the woman was standing down there and she put the gun on McComb. So he slides down and he's like, you're under arrest for treason against time and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. But it's like 3 guys standing there. But the 2 other guys, they trying to figure out what in the world's going on because they're like, okay, why is there 2 McCombs? And then, oh my God, what's he doing? They're arresting him. What's going on? But then the woman that came with him, of course, was a double agent. And she was getting paid by McComb's payroll. And she's like, yeah, I'm getting paid by him, so sorry. And then it's a whole big fight. The factory ends up catching on fire. They end up in a bunch of fight. You, of course, it's a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. You're going to get a fight right there. And they end up on the 2nd level, and he's fighting and kicking the other people. The guy ends up getting nitroglycerin on his arm, and he ends up breaking it when he kicks him, and then he ends up falling over the balcony. And then he's like, I am not gonna fight a woman, because the woman came up there and she's like, oh, then I guess this is gonna be an easy fight for me. So she's kicking his butt and he grabs her foot and says, I did not want to fight you, didn't say I wasn't going to. But I think McComb ends up shooting her or something like that, and he ends up leaving because he just barely gets out and goes back. But when he goes back, everything's messed up because McComb done messed up everything because he sent the paperwork to his past self. He already done did what needed to be done to shut them down, and they literally are shutting down on that day. So he's meeting his boss, and his boss don't know who he is. Which is bringing me back to the reference of when in Quantum Leap, the guy went back, and I did an entire review on the last episode of Quantum Leap. He's leaping towards you. God's tying all of this together right here. Oh my God. And didn't none of the team know who he was. So he's like, wait, his boss is like, who is you? And he's like, I know that you work here, but, and he's like, you don't know who I am? I've been your friend for the past such and such amount of years. He's like, if you're my friend then. He's like, I don't have many friends. And then he was talking to the computer tech who was like, yeah, he ain't got that many friends. How you his friend? And he's like, because I know you. He's like, I gotta go back. He's like, you gotta go back. Do you see that we shutting down? They are literally shutting the entire system down. And he's like, I need to go back because I got to stop McComb. Because I now understand McComb went back because he had to destroy what was necessary in order to prevent me. But he knew he needed to go back to prove, more importantly, that the woman existed, because he knew that that was necessary for the trial. And he's like, but we're shutting down. You can't go back. He said, just send me back one more time. He's like, and the whole time the guy's like, we was friends. I knew you. How did I know you? Where was you? So the guy's asking him a bunch of questions. In certain scenarios, your God-ordained spouse is going to have allies. But the way God works, and I've seen this happen in multiple cases, that when God is done using an individual, they forget that they even had an association with you. God turned their heart towards you for a season, and he will turn their heart away from you in a season alternate. But if he still needs use of this individual, they will do what's necessary, but the relationship spiritually will be severed. I'm just throwing that in there. So he ends up asking him a whole bunch of questions. This could be considered a monitoring spirit because of the fact that when they no longer are under God's pretense and God is using them, they can now become a monitoring spirit. I've had people that I know God sent into my life act as monitoring spirit. They come asking a bunch of questions. I'm like, oh, the enemy's using you as a monitoring spirit in this season. But I recognize that, so I just don't tell them what I need to tell them or I am dealing with at that moment. And then I pray for them after I get off the phone. They'll return back to themselves when that pressing issue is over. But more importantly, once I pray about it, they return to themselves. So he goes and he puts him in the time pod. They get in the time pod. He's closing up the time pod. He's like, so we were really friends? So tell me something that I know that I would know that you was my friend. He's like, I have had your wife's goulash 100 times and she always puts too much salt. And that is when the guy says, oh, we are friends. He doesn't even say it. You see the expression on his face. He's like, okay, I know. So they have police that are coming, which is resonant to the last scene in Deja Vu when the police come, the authorities come. You know that you got to go. You ain't got much time left. Your husband does not have much time left. He has to move now. He must go where he's being sent. I'm being reminded of when Lot had to leave Sodom and Gomorrah. The angels specifically gave him the instructions, go to the mountain and you go up there, but do not look back. I believe a lot of your God-ordained spouses have been dealing with shame that the enemy has put on them in order to try to keep them looking backwards with a spirit of melancholy. Remember, I talked about the prophetic, what is her name? Prophetic poetry did a word where she was talking about don't look back. She had left her destination, but had to go back for her deposit. She didn't need that deposit. She felt she needed a deposit, but when she went back, she found a bunch of stuff was still there, still set up. Big items. There are things that are on your God-ordained spouse's mind in relation to things that are going on in the time frame in which he's in, okay? And these are big things to him. And he has felt shame that he has had to walk away from these types of things. Melancholy in walking away from certain things, people, situations, scenarios. And he has to be careful that when he leaves, he does not look back. Because remember, Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt. When he walks away, he's got to go completely. He's got to release it completely. Remember in Deja Vu, I talked about this twice, that when he went through the time machine, this is the reference back, that when he went through the time machine, he could not take anything with him. No clothes, no shoes, no silver, no gold, no nothing. He could take nothing with him. What scripture was that? It was Matthew something. Go back and look at the interlude that I did. Interlude 2, I believe. I talk about it's interlude 2 for the Deja Vu film. And I talk about that scripture of all the things that he could not take with him. Your God-ordained spouse has been in distress because he knows that when he comes to you, he can't take none of that stuff with him. He has to come correct, and he has to come with the right heart, right mindset, right everything. And he can't look back. Or he's going to risk destroying himself or putting you in danger. Okay? He goes into the machine. His friend, who usually can't do that by himself, he does everything that he knows how to do, and he hits the button just as he gets shot. Remember, this friend of his represents a prophetic witness and or God. There is a sacrifice. I talked about this. Okay, God, you bringing me back through all of the words. In the review for MacGyver, and I talk about, it's one of the ones, it's the one with the elevator on it. Okay, go to the review I did on MacGyver with the elevator. It's only one that has an elevator photo. It's a clear elevator, but I can't think of the name of it. In it, there was a sacrifice. There are people that have made sacrifices, and I even talk about this in Deja Vu, that there were people that were lost due to certain actions that needed to be taken. And some put themselves on the cross. Some lives were lost and or relationships severed due to your God-ordained spouse deciding to walk with God. This is that moment that is reminiscent of Jesus's death. God put this individual on sacrifice. But he was able to, just before he died, come on now, just before he died, he hit the button to be able to get him to where he needed to go. And it's funny, the second that he reached there, he ends up landing in the middle of a road. And the road that he ends up landing in, a Mack truck is coming directly for him. Some of your God-ordained spouses, the things that they need to do, back to the Deja Vu reference, remember the truck was headed straight for him, and impacted with him when he realized who he was truly fighting? Your God-ordained spouse, the enemy wants to run him over, take him out. But in this moment, he flattens himself on the ground and the truck drives over him. Your husband is intelligent enough to know what he needs to do to protect his own safety. Sometimes we be looking from the outskirts and be like, oh my God, he's in trouble. I need to pray. Remember what I said in reference to something that Dana Ray said in relation to the chess moves? Some things you think you need to protect your God-ordained spouse from, and in other cases, you're actually getting in the way. You're not supposed to protect him. He knows what he needs to do. God has sent him there. That's why he's there. So he arrives. He gets to the hospital. When he gets to the hospital, what is a hospital? A hospital is a place of healing. There's certain things that must be healed and dealt with. And it's funny, Trust and Obedience Ministries was just talking about this the other day. You're in a season of healing. God is preparing you and he's healing you. He's finishing up the process. He's finishing up the healing. And my dad went to the doctor this morning because he was dealing with issues in his stomach. So funny, Lord. I get it. I get it. Some of them need healing. God's been trying to heal them and deal with those issues. But he's got to turn it around. And he's got to do it the way he needs to do it. And you can't interfere with that. So with that being said, he gets to the hospital. The woman is in the hospital. And he said, I'm going to need for you to testify against McCombs. She said, fine. Whatever you need. But in the case something happens, I need proof that you are and were in existence in this time frame. She said they just took a vial of blood from me. So he goes to the lab to check the blood. I'm being reminded of the blood of Jesus that protects you. He goes and gets the blood vial, but where her vial of blood was, it was in the same set of blood vials that his wife's blood vial was in. And when he looks at it, it says that the blood was in reference to the fact that his wife was pregnant. And now he knows it. He didn't hear her tell him that when and before she passed. So he now has the opportunity. He's like, well, since McComb done came back, I gotta stop him, and they going back to the house. So I know I have the opportunity to stop this situation from happening. When he goes back to go to the woman, she's already dead. So that's a dead situation. There are certain things that are dead situations that your God-ordained spouse cannot stop. But in him making choices in this moment, there are certain things that he's going to have to make choices in. And this was something that happened 10 years later, right? This was the part that the Lord brought my attention to that I forgot to mention. Esther. When Esther was brought into the king's palace, it was 5 years after she was brought in as his wife that she had to stand up and do what she needed to do. Some of you, and I'm going to say it right here. Some of you as the wife, your only job is, and this lines up with the film, your job is to be the mother. Your job is to carry the children. But you are not going to be called in until maybe 3 or 5 years later. The thing that you're called to do will make itself prevalent within that first 5 years. And then you will know what your purpose is for why you were there. Some of you coming in with a purpose, but the thing that is, what's the word I'm looking for? God. The thing that's most prevalent that you need to do, that's going to make itself apparent in 5 years. I've been sensing that. Every time I think of that scripture, it's going to take about 5 years for the real thing, meaning whatever it is that you're supposed to accomplish with your husband in his industry may not appear for about 5 years. But you're supposed to be the wife, take care of the home, and do your assignment to take care of your husband to get him prepped for what's going to happen in that 5-year period. She was only married to him for 12 years. But she was able to assist him for that next 12 years. The position that your God-ordained spouse is going to be put in, it may not come up for the reason he's there for a series of years. This situation, it took 10 years for it to unfold what was necessary for him to know, for him to have to go back and fix the past. Okay? So he ends up going straight to the mall, which perfectly, when he arrives, he realizes, he sees the guys there. They had only just arrived, and his wife is walking through the mall to the position that she was in at the beginning of the film. Okay? So he goes to her and he grabs her and tells her, before he can even do the thing with her, he just says, "It's me." And she's like, "What is wrong with you?" And he's like, "It's me, but I need you to listen to me." And when she turns around, she sees him and she's like, "Wait a minute, you didn't look like this morning. What in the world is going on here?" And he's like, "Shh, I need you to follow me." And he sees the two guys, so he pulls her out the way. He already done knocked the guy that stole a woman's purse. He said, don't even try it. He already done knocked him out. After that, he takes her into the hallway, pulls her into a closet. You know how the malls have that long hallways? My mother used to take me through that back hallway all the time when I was a kid. It's a back hallway that they put all the storage and all that kind of stuff in. He takes her and puts her in the room, and then she's like, oh my God. So it really, she's like, how do I know this is you? But I mean, he repeats the line that he said over and over and over and over again from the videotape he had of her in relation to the birdhouse. She's like, oh my God, it is you. So you're like from like 10 years? So am I pretty back then? So am I going to still look pretty? He said, you look the same way you look now. She's like, oh, okay. She's like, okay, then what am I doing? What's going on, though? He says, I need you to go back out there. Okay? When you go back out there, you're going to meet me. When you meet me, you're going to act like everything's fine. You're going to follow the day as it's supposed to go. And I believe he tells her what she needs to say to him and all that kind of stuff. And you're just going to keep things in ordinance. Because he's trying not to mess up what happened. So he's like, now, you want me to really prove to you that I am your husband? That this is something different? He takes her out there and he points to where her husband was walking on the secondary bridge on the second floor to come down to where she was. She's like, oh my God. And then she looks at him, she's like, oh my God. He said, follow the day exactly. Just keep going the way that you were going to go. Because you have something you have to tell him. She's like, I have something He said, yes, you have something you have to tell him. And she realizes he knows. She's like, oh my goodness. Like, oh, I'm pregnant. He said, you have to tell him. And then he leaves. But before he leaves, he couldn't resist the opportunity. And evidently the other version of him was on the stairs some daggone where.